Janava Yashodanandana Rajanara Yashodanandana Rajanara Jamuna Tira Vanacha Jamuna Tira Vanacha Jaya Radha Kunjabi Hari Jaya Radha Kunjabi Hari Yashodanandana Braja Janana Yashodanandana Braja Janana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Jaya Gopi Janavalabha Jaya Gopi Janavalabha Girivanadari Yashodanandana Braja Janara Yashodanandana Braja Janara Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parvarajikacharya Stotra Sat Shri Srimad A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jaya Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parvarajikacharya Stotra Sat Shri Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Guru Premanandi Hari Hari Bo. All glories to the Son of devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the Son of devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the summoned devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Prabhupada. Swami Bhaktivedanta Swami Tamani. I just put in earbuds and I'm using my phone. Please tell me if I am not audible.
I hear you loud and clear.
Hare Krishna. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Good morning, devotees. Today we are reading from the 5th canto, chapter 24, the subterranean heavenly planets. Starting with verse 15, I'll be reading verse 15, 16, and 17. 17 has a purport, so I will honor the Sanskrit and word for 17, and I'll just read through the translations of the previous two verses for the sake of time. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay. Verse 15 says, when the Sudarshan disk enters those provinces, the pregnant wives of the demons all have miscarriages due to fear of its effulgence. I'll say prayer now and just comment what I can on the verses. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshunamritam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivas Hari Gaura Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Verse 15 again. When the Sudarshan disk enters those provinces, the pregnant wives of the demons all have miscarriages due to fear of its effulgence. So this is a description of the subterranean heavenly planets in the lower portion of the universe. And I've heard my Guru Maharaj explain that the conception of God, the knowledge of God, is practically absent in these lower planetary systems, generally speaking. What little knowledge there is specifically of the Sudarshan chakra. There's very little knowledge and very little worship of God and understanding of God, but there is some little bit of knowledge that the Sudarshan chakra, who of course is Krishna's personal weapon, enters into these regions to give people their karma and kill them, take them from their current body and push them onto their next body. So we see in this verse, this explanation that the Sudarshan disk does exactly this, and those who are in these planetary systems have fear of this disk. And as a side note, I was just listening yesterday to Indradyumna Maharaj's what is the series called? Stimulation for Ecstatic Love. There's two classes, I think, specifically on Sudarshan chakra. It's very, very fascinating. I highly recommend it if anybody's interested. You can find those on YouTube. Okay, moving on to text 16. My dear king, now I shall describe to you the lower planetary systems, one by one, beginning from Atala. In Atala, there is a demon, the son of Mayadanava, named Bala, who created 96 kinds of mystic power. Some so-called yogis and swamis take advantage of this mystic power to cheat people even today. Simply by yawning, the demon Bala created three kinds of women known as Swarini, Kamini, and Pumschali. The Swarinis like to marry men from their own group. The Kaminis marry men from any group. And the Pumschalis change husbands one after another. If a man enters the planet of Atala, these women immediately capture him and induce him to drink an intoxicating beverage made with a drug known as hataka. In parentheses, it says cannabis indica, aka marijuana. This intoxicant endows the man with great sexual prowess, of which the women take advantage for enjoyment. A woman will enchant him with attractive glances, intimate words, smiles of love, and then embraces. In this way, she induces him to enjoy sex with her to her full satisfaction. Because of his increased sexual power, the man thinks himself stronger than 10,000 elephants and considers himself most perfect. Indeed, illusioned and intoxicated by false pride, he thinks himself God, ignoring impending death. So this information of the different planets, particularly the subterranean heavenly planets, is quite fascinating. Much of it is inconceivable to our materially conditioned intelligence. But thanks to Srimad Bhagavatam, thanks to Srila Prabhupada, we get some enlightenment and some purification and some information through information of these different realms, of these other dimensions of existence within this universe. And I was just talking to a friend of mine in Mayapur. He used to work for the creative developmental team for the TOVP, and him and multiple other leading persons in that team resigned because there's apparently a rift within the plan there, within the development of the project there, away from Prabhupada's original desire, which is to present Srimad Bhagavatam as it is and not cater to modern scientific ideals. And so the fifth canto is quite abstract, to say the least. And it's not easy to understand, even for devotees, even for the most intelligent devotees, even Prabhupada himself. I heard that when he was translating this, he said that this was not his expertise, but being a servant of his Guru Maharaj and a servant of Lord Chaitanya, he gave us more than we could, more than even we could handle. But something that I found very, very helpful, I mean, I can't claim to know any of this stuff either, but something that I found very, very helpful in this matter, in trying to understand something that is inconceivable, is Mahaprabhu's personal philosophy, which is achintya bhed abhed tattva, simultaneous one and difference. The possibility that something inconceivably, it's inconceivable. We can't wrap our intelligence around it unless Krishna endows us with the intelligence. We can't reach up and grab it ourselves. It's achintya. But the possibility that two things can be simultaneously the same and different at the same time. They can be independent of each other, and they can also be merged in the same and be one at the same time. And so I found that very helpful whenever these topics come up, you know, information in the fifth canto, or whether the jiva fell from Vaikuntha, or, you know, whether bhakti is automatically inherent in the jiva, or it's given. All these points of contention amongst devotees, I always remind myself Mahaprabhu's achintya bhed abhed tattva philosophy. It makes things palatable, and it, for me personally, it makes the mind much more easy to deal with and much more pacified. But yeah, it's amazing that this verse, people on this planet right now engage in this kind of behavior. My guess is that on this planet, it's the extent of this behavior is more limited than what is available in the subterranean planet. But yeah, these kinds of behaviors are not that far out of reach, I guess you could say. People can engage in these kinds of things, including mystic power, which is extremely difficult, but it is possible even on this plane of existence, even on Earth. And then if they have the karma, they go down into these different realms, these subterranean heavenly planets. Okay. Moving on to text 17, I will do my best to honor the Sanskrit. I'll go through the word for word, the translation and purport. Tatod tatsad vittale haro bhagavan hatta keshvaraha swaparshada buddha ganavritaha prajapati sargo pabrim hannaya bhavo bhavanya saha mituni bhute aste yataha pravrita sarit pravara hataki nama bhavayor viryena yatra chitrabanor mattarishvana samidyamana ojasa pibati tam nishyutam hatakakyam suvarnam Bhushanen Asarendrav Arodheshu Purushaha Saha Purushibir Darayanti. Word for word. Tataha, the planet. Atala, Ad Adhastat, beneath, Vitale, on the planet, Haraha, Lord Shiva, Bhagavan, the most powerful personality, Hatakeshwaraha, the master of gold, Swaparshada, by his own associates, Bhutagana, who are ghostly living beings, Avritaha, surrounded, Prajapati Sarga, of the creation of Lord Brahma, Upabrim Hannaya, to increase the population, Avaha, Lord Shiva, Bhavanya Saha, with his wife, Bhavani, Mituni Bhutaha, being united in sex, Aste, remains, Yataha, from that planet, Vitala, Pravrita, being emanated, Sarit, Pravara, the great river, Hataki, Nama, named, Bhavayoho Niryena, due to the semina and ovum of Lord Shiva and Bhavani, Yatra, where, Chitrabhanuhu, the fire god, Matarishvana, by the wind, Samidyamanaha, being brightly inflamed, Ojasa, with great strength, Pibati, drinks, Tat, that, Nisht Yutam, spit out with a hissing sound, Hataka Akyam, named Hataka, Suvarnam, gold, Bhushanena, by different types of ornaments, Asura Indra, of the great Asuras, Avarodhishu, in the homes, Purushaha, the males, Saha, with, Purushibihi, the wives and women, Darayanti, where. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada Gita. The next planet below Atala is Vitala, wherein Lord Shiva, who is known as the master of gold mines, lives with his personal associates, the ghosts and similar living entities. Lord Shiva, as the progenitor, engages in sex with Bhavani, the progenitress, to produce living entities, and from the mixture of their vital fluid, the river named Hataki is generated. When fire, being made to blaze by the wind, drinks of this river and then sizzles and spits it out, it produces gold called Hataka. The demons who live on that planet with their wives decorate themselves with various ornaments made from that gold, and thus they live there very happily. So here's another description of a subterranean heavenly realm below the planet we previously described, apparently reigned over by Lord Shiva and Bhavani. And there's lots of gold that is created there. And this gold is utilized very happily by the demons who inhabit this place. Purport. It appears that when Bhava and Bhavani, Lord Shiva and his wife, unite sexually, the emulsification of their secretion creates a chemical which, when heated by fire, can produce gold. It is said that the alchemists of the medieval age tried to prepare gold from base metal, and Srila Sanatana Goswami also states that when bell metal is treated with mercury, it can produce gold. Srila Sanatana Goswami mentions this in regard to the initiation of low-class men to turn them into brahmanas. So this purport is very fascinating to me. It's bringing up a point that I've been meditating on occasionally for some time now, which is the concept of alchemy. Alchemy is brought up numerous times in Shastra, directly by Prabhupada and by the other acharyas. And it's something very interesting to me. I wish I could do some more research on this, but alas, time and resources are limited. But yeah, it's quite fascinating that, well, for those who don't know what alchemy is, I barely know what it is. Alchemy is basically the forerunner to modern science. It's the understanding and manipulation of material matter. Importantly, the important difference between alchemy in the past and modern science now is that there is two major things. One is the acknowledgement of God. Two is subtle energy, subtle things, which are mostly absent in modern science. If modern science acknowledges anything subtle, they immediately want to empirically tear it apart and analyze it and put it on a graph, which is basically trying to understand it in a gross way. But yeah, this alchemy was kind of the forerunner to modern science, and then they killed God and totally took God out of the equation. And now what we have is atheistic modern science. But this point about alchemy is brought up that things can be transformed, or the word often used is transmutated. And specifically, Prabhupada is referencing Srila Sanatana Goswami's point that you actually can make gold out of different metals. That was people, I think back then there was greater understanding as the desire, and I think there was a lot of figurative language used in turning something base metal into gold. I think nowadays we hear gold and we just immediately think, wealth and power. But I think in the past that was true, in addition to turning something else into greater than what it originally was. Which is exactly what Prabhupada is saying here, that Srila Sanatana Goswami says that the initiation of low-class men, or basically non-brahmanas, into brahmanas by the process of Krishna consciousness, that in of itself is alchemy, transmutating something into something greater than what it originally was by using apparently mystic abilities. Sanatana Goswami said, Yata kanchannatam yati kamsyam rasa vidhanataha tata diksha vidhanena dvijatvam jayate nirna. As one can transform kamsa, or bell metal, into gold by treating it with mercury, one can also turn a low-born man into a brahmana by initiating him properly into Vaishnava activities. The International Society for Krishna Consciousness is trying to turn lechas and yavanas into real brahmanas by properly initiating them and stopping them from engaging in meat eating, intoxication, illicit sex, and gambling. One who stops these four principles of sinful activity and chants the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra can certainly become a pure brahmana through the process of bona fide initiation, as suggested by Srila Sanatana Goswami. Apart from this, if one takes a hint from this verse and learns how to mix mercury with bell metal by properly heating and melting them, one can get gold very cheaply. The alchemists of the medieval age tried to manufacture gold, but they were unsuccessful, perhaps because they did not follow the right instructions. Thus is the end of that purport. So it's amazing that Prabhupada mentions, even at the very end of this purport, in a separate paragraph, he says that apparently it's possible to turn base metal, like tin or brass or something like that, into gold by treating with mercury, and of course having the knowledge and expertise of alchemy in of itself. Quite fascinating. And I'll talk a little bit more about this point of transmutation, transforming something, and more about alchemy. But just as a side note, this turning something into gold is seen literally, and it can also be seen as figuratively. So the alchemists of the previous ages in Europe and also the Middle East they understood that turning something into gold was also a spiritual process. They were basically turning themselves from materially contaminated into spiritually enlightened. That was the whole reference of turning something into gold. And of course, they were interested in God's creation. And so turning base metals into actual gold was also there literally. I know about this because I am interested in psychology, and Carl Jung, who's the father of modern psychology, the latter part of his life he dedicated almost completely to studying ancient alchemy, which is quite fascinating. And he's the father of modern psychology, but before and above that, he was a philosopher. In my opinion, he was a Paramatma realized, or at least partially realized, Jnani, and so he was naturally interested in these things. But the real the real gold was turning one's consciousness from base metal into gold, or in other words, turning one's consciousness from material consciousness into spiritual consciousness, turning it into gold. And so there's other reference to this concept of transmutation and alchemy elsewhere in the Bhagavatam. So in alchemy, the concept of the touchstone, also known as the philosopher's stone, is there. And this is reference to Mahaprabhu, actually. So the touchstone or philosopher's stone is a physical object, and also figuratively, it can be a person that can transform or transmutate one substance into a greater substance. And so this is referenced in to Mahaprabhu directly. This is Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila, chapter 2, verse 81. By personally tasting the mellows of love of Godhead, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu taught his direct disciples the process. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is a wealthy capitalist possessing the touchstone of love of God, not considering whether one is a proper or improper recipient. He gives his treasure to anyone and everyone. Thus, he is the most munificent. Purport. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's capital is the touchstone of love of Godhead, and consequently, he is a great owner of that transcendental treasure. After making unlimited amounts of gold, the touchstone remains the same. Similarly, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, although distributing love of Godhead unlimitedly, still remained the supreme owner of this transcendental opulence. His devotees, who learned it from him, also had to distribute it munificently all over the world. This Krishna consciousness movement, following the footsteps of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his confidential devotees, is also trying to distribute love of Godhead all over the world through the chanting of the holy names of the Lord. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So we see here, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami is using terminology of alchemy to describe Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Mahaprabhu is a touchstone or a philosopher's stone, an object that can turn anything base, anything lower, so to speak, to pure gold or pure Krishna consciousness. It's quite fascinating. So Mahaprabhu has given us the Maha Mantra, which you could also consider a touchstone, that by engaging in this process and sincerely chanting and endeavoring to chant deeper and with more love, with more attention, one gradually becomes transformed, transmutated from lower consciousness or base metal to Krishna consciousness or God consciousness, which is pure gold. So this reference of gold and purifying it is also elsewhere in the Bhagavatam. I will read from the 11th canto, from the Uddhava Gita. This is Krishna's instructions to Uddhava. 11th canto, chapter 14, Lord Krishna explains the yoga system verse 25. Just as gold, when smelted in fire, gives up its impurities and returns to its pure, brilliant state, similarly, the spirit soul, absorbed in the fire of bhakti yoga, is purified of all contamination caused by previous fruitive activities and returns to its original position of serving me in the spiritual world. So here we see again reference that the spirit soul is like gold, and being in the material atmosphere, it is contaminated with materialistic ego, materialistic mind, a gross body. These are impurities. And by practicing in the process of Krishna consciousness or bhakti yoga, the impurities can be eradicated. They can be gradually smelted. They can be taken away. And it's interesting to note that we're talking about gold. It's a metal, and it can't be purified by an artificial, superficial process. No, it requires some intense heat, very, very high temperatures. And so bhakti yoga here is referred to as fire. So not just any fire too, but if you know anything about metallurgy, it requires extremely high temperatures to melt gold or any other type of metal and separate them and purify them. In reference to this, I will read the purport by disciples of Srila Prabhupada. This purport's very nice. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, this verse indicates that the devotee goes back home, back to Godhead, and there worships Lord Krishna in his original spiritual body, which is compared to the original pure form of smelted gold. Gold alloyed with inferior metals cannot be purified by water and soap. Similarly, the heart's impurities cannot be removed by superficial processes. Only the fire of love of Godhead can cleanse one's soul and send one back home, back to Godhead, to engage in eternal loving service of the Lord. So this explanation can actually be quite heavy if we dig into it, because it implies that the process of Krishna consciousness can we can experience some burning sensation due to the fire. Fire or intense purification process is required to get the impurities out of gold, or to continue the analogy, to purify the coverings of the spirit soul, which include mind, ego, intelligence, gross body. And so the process can be apparently painful, but it's not actually, it's painful, but it's not actually painful. It depends on our perception of it. As Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj would say, how do we codify the information? When we experience pain, how do we codify it? Do we see it as suffering due to ignorance, or do we see it as an opportunity for growth? Do we use knowledge? Do we use gratitude? Do we use willingness to change, to embrace the fire, embrace the love of Krishna, to purify us and bring us closer to him? So I will read one more verse in reference to this purification. It's actually a verse I shared in the connections group on Monday. Many of you know this verse. It's Lord Kapila Dev's instructions to his mother in the third canto, chapter 25, the Glories of Devotional Service, verse 33. Jarayatya ashu ya kusham nigirnam analo yata. Bhakti, devotional service, dissolves the subtle body of the living entity without separate effort, just as fire in the stomach digests all that we eat. So I've been quite fascinated with this verse because the subtle body is something that I've been trying to purify and use in Krishna's service for some time. And I've had quite a lot of baggage in this lifetime alone, not to speak of my other lifetimes, that my subtle body, my mind, my ego, my intelligence are quite heavily contaminated. And it's been an impediment to my bhakti. And so I've been trying to make it a point to purify them. And it's saying here that bhakti, devotional service, dissolves the subtle body without separate effort, just as fire in the stomach digests all that we eat. And so this word, jarayati, dissolves. Prabhupada translates this word as dissolve. Now, if you go on database and you look at this word jarayati, there's no other definition used elsewhere. And so Sarvatma Prabhu very graciously helped me. He talked with his Guru Maharaj because I was interested in this word jarayati, and he the note is in my phone, and I'm using my phone, so I can't pull it up at this moment. But he said that the word jarayati, the root of the word, I don't know how to pronounce it properly. It's dri, I believe it's pronounced, and it refers to consume something, to change something. And I just found it really fascinating that Prabhupada used the word dissolve to translate this word. Prabhupada was in the pharmaceutical industry. He knew very well the process of dissolution. So for him to use this word is, it's quite fascinating to me, because when you dissolve something, when I hear the word dissolve, the first thing that comes to mind is to gradually destroy something. That's just due to my conditioning in this lifetime. That's the first thing that comes to mind. But that's not actually what the word dissolve implies. And in chemistry, that's not actually what happens. Dissolve means to change the form of something, but it doesn't actually destroy that thing. So the subtle body of the living entity is not actually destroyed, it's transformed, or in terms of alchemy, transmutated into something greater. If you take sugar, pure sugar crystals, and you put them in water, the crystals disappear. Apparently, they're destroyed, but the sugar itself is not actually destroyed. And the evidence of this is in the taste of the water. If you taste the water, it will taste sweet, which is empirical evidence that the sugar is actually there within the water. It's just become invisible. It's changed forms, and you can no longer perceive it directly in the way that you previously perceived it. And so if we use this information and apply it to the verse, we can see that the subtle body, the mind, the intelligence, the ego, they're not destroyed in the process of Krishna consciousness. They're transmutated. They're transformed into something greater. And so I know for myself, when I first started practicing, I read this verse again and again, and I heard it in many other verses. And I thought that these aspects of my conditioned self need to be destroyed or eradicated. But that's just a limited understanding. Truth is that they need to be transmutated by the touchstone of the Maha Mantra and the mercy of Guru. They need to be transmutated or transformed into something greater. In the purport, Prabhupada talks about mukti, liberation. He stresses the point that mukti or liberation is subordinate to bhakti. So even if you want that, just practice Krishna consciousness and this mukti will come to you. But it's not the highest. It's not the greatest thing. I've actually heard Prabhupada explain in a lecture once that Brahman realization is for the common man. So it's not actually that great. Mike, it's interesting that Prabhupada talks about mukti so much in this purport. My guess is because, being a jnani myself, I'm very much attracted to this verse about purifying the subtle body, and jnanis by nature are attracted to mukti or liberation. So I find it, at least that's my intuition, that Prabhupada knows that persons of that nature will be attracted to this, and they have that residue of contamination of just wanting liberation from material miseries. Yeah, there's a lot more that I'd like to share about this, and a lot more research that I'd like to do in this regard, but yeah, time and resources are limited, but that's all I have to share. If anybody has any comments, questions, corrections, we have about 10 minutes, I believe, 9 minutes. If anybody wants to share anything, please share.
Haribo Nagaraj Nitai Prabhu, just wanted to say thanks for explaining the concepts and process of Bhakti Yoga by means of analogy. It always gives us some newer insight, new perspective. And I especially appreciate your point about transmuting the qualities into devotional qualities, not destruction of, but a transformation of. Sometimes it's like you hear something, it's just so obvious, but you have that aha, oh yeah, moment. So I had one of those aha moments right now. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, it's my pleasure to serve the devotees. Hare Krishna. Yeah, I know I have that very deeply. It's tied to the purport, which I didn't read, I'm sorry, but it's tied to Prabhupada's point of desiring liberation. We get so frustrated with material complexities and material miseries that sometimes we just want it to be eradicated, and that applies to us still in the process, of Krishna consciousness. We try our best to serve, and so many things come in the way, and we automatically think, if I just get this damn thing out of the way, then I can get to Krishna, then I can get to pure bhakti. But sometimes it's a little bit more complicated, a little more subtle than that. That it doesn't necessarily need to be destroyed; it just needs to be changed in use in Krishna's service. Thank you for sharing. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Nagaraj Nitai Prabhu. I would like to thank you for a very nice class. I too am appreciating your angle on bhakti, your discussion of the alchemical process of transforming one thing into something of greater value. So it sparked a lot of thought for me. Interesting. Don't really have a lot of thoughts to share about this. There is one thing of relative insignificance that I thought I would mention. These descriptions of subterranean heavenly planets and the conditions probably will appeal to some individuals. Materialistic individuals certainly would think that that's pretty cool. The devotees should not be enamored by these things. If they are, then it might be an indication that they need to reread the earlier cantos of Srimad Bhagavatam so that they can hear these chapters in the proper frame of mind. Within the context of the understanding presented earlier in the Bhagavatam. I found it curious that in text 16 there is mention of Hataka, an intoxicating beverage made with a drug known as Hataka. So, and it's in brackets here. It says cannabis indica. And what was curious to me was that in text 17, the exact same word is used again. But having an entirely different meaning. It's referring then to gold. Where is that now? When fire being made to blaze by the wind drinks of this river and then sizzles and spits it out, it produces gold called Hataka, and it's exactly the same word. So
I noticed that too. I don't know, but I know nothing of Sanskrit, so I don't know what to make of it.
yeah, that's peculiar. I think it's coincidental, but I don't know what that. I have nothing further to comment on that. With regards to text 16, to be honest, when I heard when I read in brackets cannabis indica, that this Hataka was cannabis indica, I actually was skeptical that that was the case. It's hard for me to imagine that Srila Prabhupada would have actually included that in his translation. And I don't want to cast doubts on Srimad Bhagavatam. Certainly, that would be terribly sinful. But my skepticism arises because I have a lot of experience having delved very deeply into some of the unauthorized changes introduced to some of the books by early editors of Srila Prabhupada's books. And I don't want to mention any names. The individual chiefly responsible is no longer with us. But he introduced some changes that Srila Prabhupada was pretty upset about. And he, of course, demanded that things be restored to their original condition, and that has been done. So, so for we now have the books in a form that is as close as possible to what Srila Prabhupada originally dictated. And I say as close as possible because in all cases, Srila Prabhupada's dictations required editing. Srila Prabhupada was well aware of the limitations of his English, and so he employed editors in transforming his English into something that would be more readily understood and as correct as possible. So
I found the brackets translation very intriguing, and I was looking on database and I couldn't find anything even related to those words specifically with that translation. So, but that is, to your knowledge, that's the best of Prabhupada's translation originally.
Well, I need to talk to some individuals who were involved with the BBT at the time and see what they can say about this. My suspicion is that this was something added by an editor and not later corrected because my practical experience in the 60s and early 70s as an amateur pharmacologist. My experience was that cannabis indica produced none of the effects that are described in this verse. Um, Now, I am aware of some botanical derivatives that will produce those kinds of results, and I don't want to mention those things and give anyone any ideas, but cannabis indica is not one of them. But we don't know from this verse how actually that was prepared, and the process of preparation is
Right.
going to be, you know, a significant factor. What other ingredients may have been introduced and so on. From Ayurveda, we learned that the um, formulation of different preparations involves many different steps, beginning with the harvesting of the herbs and other ingredients to be incorporated. It's done at specific times,
Right.
with the accompaniment of various mantras. The individual who does that has to be qualified to be able to chant those mantras, and you know he's got to have brahminical qualities. He has to be sutri, of course, at the time that he's doing all of these things. So you know it's an elaborate process. This verse is not going into detail about the preparation of this intoxicating beverage, so we don't really know what it is. It may be that in fact cannabis indica is one of the ingredients. We don't know all of what's there, so it may be that
Right.
there is such a thing produced from cannabis indica, but cannabis indica by itself does not have those kinds of properties. The effect is, at least in my experience, it's quite different. Um, and I don't know. That's probably all I have to say on these verses. Um, yeah, we certainly don't want anybody to get any ideas, but the Vaishnavis should be immune to that kind of influence. But it would not be unprecedented. There have been, you know, devotees who have, you know, sometimes devotees fall down. Sometimes they come under the influence of the modes of nature. Sometimes they're subject to Maya. If they're not very careful, it's a razor's edge. Srila Prabhupada used to always warn us that, you know, we are not sufficiently afraid of Maya. We sometimes are a little bit casual in our approach to what he described as a declaration of war against Maya, and with the warning that, you know, that in war there will be casualties. So it happens sometimes that, you know, devotees get into Maya. I know that in the early days of ISKCON, I experienced that even amongst leadership there was speculation that oh gosh, Somaras, many devotees were speculating that this was actually produced from some sort of hallucinogenic, like psilocybin or some such thing, you know, something that produced LSD-like effects, which is a, you know, pretty wild speculation. But you know, I can remember once hearing a particular sannyasi actually discussing this with a group of devotees and presenting it in that way. So Maya attacks in all kinds of ways. But the you know the for someone who is materially affected, the what's being described of the conditions and activities and these planets can be very attractive. It's like the realization of everything that a materialist hopes to achieve in their life. The devotees, however, are Of course, they're not looking for these things at all. They simply want Krishna, or at least that's the state of consciousness that we're trying to achieve. That we care nothing for any of these various opulent material situations. We just simply want actually just to please Krishna. And without consideration as to whether or not we ourselves are pleased, but of course the side effect is that the greatest pleasure comes from pleasing Krishna. It's the perfection of one's existence, and the realization of all of one's desires and aspirations. Everything finds its perfection simply in rendering loving devotional service to Krishna. So devotees have to remain mindful of this, and that's part of the reason that we hear Srimad Bhagavatam every day to refresh the understanding, the consciousness, and the determination for elevation to that perfected consciousness, because we are very forgetful. Practically from moment to moment, we can forget everything. So we need constant reminders. We have gone over time by 7 minutes, so I'll shut up. Thank you again, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Tarka. I sincerely appreciate your sharing. It's really helpful to have your the history of your experience in the early days. When you share your personal experience, it gives a lot of context and some extra information that I, at least personally, find very helpful and insightful. And yeah, your curiosity about the Sanskrit words and the printed text was the same as mine. So if you find any information, I humbly beg you to please share with me. Thank you for sharing. Thank you, everyone, for
I looked
attending.
all over. I used a bunch of different search engines. I looked all over the place to try to find anywhere on earth that there's any mention of this particular word, and there are some other things that go by a similar name. There are some Japanese uses of a similar word. There is a hobby company that produces paints and such by that name, but I can't find any kind of a plant or herb or any such thing by that name. So it remains a mystery.
Yeah, my guess is that what you were saying is that there must be some context within the editing. I don't know much about Sanskrit, but I know that the context of the words, like the definitions of the words, can be drastically changed by the use of the context. And perhaps within the editing process, there was some information amongst the editors that we don't have. So yeah, I don't know, but yeah, thank you for sharing. The mystery continues. Okay. Hare Krishna. Thank you, devotees. I hope your day is full of miracles and bhakti. Thank you for allowing me to honor Srimad Bhagavatam. Hare Krishna.